All right, so to get started, you need to have your water cup, your watercolors. Remember, one per person, one water cup per table. And then today you will need salt. I have salt divided up into little containers by the sink, okay? So we are going to go ahead and start where we left off. Well, first, let me show you. So yesterday we did the saran wrap, and after it dries, it just kind of creates this really cool texture that you can kind of see there. So that piece of saran wrap, I would go ahead and just hang on to it because you can use it throughout if you didn't throw it away already, okay? So we have a few more watercolor techniques that we need to talk about. So the first thing that we need to do, remember, let's go ahead and get our watercolors wet. And we are going to go through what Drybrush is. So you will also need a paper towel to get going with this. Okay. All right, so for Drybrush, the reason I'm going to put this water cup here so you guys can see it a little easier. What Drybrush means is you are creating kind of fine line details. And so we want obviously our brush cannot be entirely dry, but we want it to create a fine line, and it's not going to do that if it's really, really wet. So when you are doing Drybrush, my watercolor is kind of saturating with the water already. So I'm going to take my brush and I'm going to squeeze out that water. Sometimes you might want to use a little bit of a paper towel to wipe it off if you need to. So I'm just going to dip into here. And so it should almost look, there's no paint dripping off, but you can see that paint on there sitting pretty good. So when I take my dry brush, it should create nice fine lines. So you could almost like write with it, okay? So that is what Drybrush is. Now, the reason why yesterday I had you guys paint a solid wash here is because Drybrush doesn't always look good with just a plain white background, okay? So for instance, I'm gonna rinse out my brush here. So now I'm gonna use my paper towel, kind of squeeze that out. Then I'm going to do Drybrush over top of this, and that can kind of create a cool effect. So I'm going to use just some black here. So then you can just have a little bit more of some designs and things like that. And that sometimes looks better on top of a solid color than just a white background. So let me show you what would happen if I try to make the line without rinsing out my brush or wringing it out. So if it's just wet, I don't get quite as a fine line, okay? So the more water you have, the more colors are going to spread out. So take a second to try that one out. Okay, so you've completed the Drybrush, and we are going to go ahead and do my favorite one. And this will be one of your favorite ones. It's probably my favorite one because it kind of looks like tie-dye. This is the one that is called Wet in Wet. So the reason why it is called that, I know it's a weird name, but it is called that because you are painting wet paint onto a wet surface. So to begin this one, I know that you guys aren't going to be able to see this very well. To begin this one, you just take your water and you get the area wet. So you're just painting with water, okay? Do not do this yet. Wait until I'm done here, and then you will do this. Now, we need to pick colors that are in common. So that means we want to pick colors that mix well together. So take a look at the posters on the side of the room by the sinks, or check out the color wheel. Colors that are next to each other are going to mix well together. I am going to use kind of a blue, yellow, green combination. Watch what I do. I am not using paint strokes, just kind of like that alcohol, that rubbing alcohol. I'm going to dot the paint in and it will spread out. I'm going to switch colors. and it creates kind of a tie-dye effect. And when colors get closer to each other, they are going to blend together. Use some of this. So you can see those colors starting to come together. Now, we'll take a look at this maybe at the end to see how some of those have mixed together a little bit. But if there's a bunch of white spaces in there like that still and it's not blending together all the way, just add in some more dots of colors and those colors will kind of start to mix. Okay? So this one's pretty cool. Now, I'm going to show you what not to do. If you get this area wet here and you're using too much water, let's say I use way too much water on my color and it just goes like that, that's not really going to do anything for me, okay? And I try to add another color in. I'm going to use some purple this time. It's just going to end up kind of mixing together and it's going to form a new color rather than separating out like that, okay? So go ahead and try that one out. You really have to be careful of this to keep it still. Remember, don't pick that paper up, otherwise it's going to run like crazy. So take a second to try that out a couple of times. That's a big enough space that you could try it a couple of times. All right, so for the last one on this page, then we're going to do two more. We are going to learn wax resist. This one's super easy. I have to grab a crayon from behind me. So you will need to grab a crayon as well. Those are in the same cupboards by the where we keep the watercolors. So for this one, you guys have probably done this before, that water and wax do not mix. So if I put my crayon down, crayon has wax in it, so you need to press hard with this, otherwise your design is not going to work. So here I'm just going to press lightly. You can probably hardly even see that, okay, but here's the difference. Then you simply choose a color. Sometimes you have to use if you don't have the right consistency, doesn't work the best. And well, I gotta water that down a little bit. There we go. So then you can see where that watercolor is not sticking to that. If you don't have enough paint, if you didn't press hard enough with the crayon, it's just gonna go right over top of it. You're not even gonna be able to see the crayon. So make sure you have kind of the right consistency as you go over top. So that is all wax resist is. It's kind of a cool, simple technique that you guys can use. Okay? So go ahead, grab a crayon, try that out. All right, now the next one, I'm gonna move that out of the way. We have two more that we need to do. We need to complete the salt watercolor technique. And this one's kind of cool because you can do, we talked about how you can combine a lot of these techniques together. So we're going to say, well, we're going to save that one for last. We're going to go ahead and go to gradient. So what a gradient is when you have one color that transitions into another. So once again, the color wheel is an example of gradients next to each other, as well as those posters over on the side of the room. So I am going to pick a color, and my color I'm going to pick is orange. And if you're looking at the color wheel right now, I am going to go orange all the way to blue. So that means I'm going to have to start with orange, then go yellow orange, then yellow green, then blue green, then blue. So let's go ahead and see how this works. So it's going to be like the one we did for value yesterday, except I'm using paint instead of water. Okay. So I start with my orange up at the top. I would leave enough space that you can do this a couple of times with some different combinations of colors. So now I am going to use my yellow to make my yellow orange. So notice, I'm going to put these separate first. I don't have them touch. But then when I'm ready, I kind of blend those together a little bit, okay? So start with it not touching, then blend it in. Now I'm going to do that same thing with the green. So I start with the green here, not touching. And then that yellow and green kind of mix together to create kind of a light green color. And then I'm going to continue that with my blue. So it's really like just picking a piece in the rainbow. Oh, that looks very blue-green, so I want to have a separate blue to end with. There we go. Okay, so here is my gradient. I will show you another option of colors that you can do this with. This time I'm going to start with red, violet, and go to green. So here's my red, violet, a combination of red and purple. And then I'm going to go purple, doing that same type of thing, and mix together. Then I go to my blue, mix together, and then my green. And then I create that blue-green in between like that. So those are some really good ways that you can do that. So go ahead, take some time to try that. Make sure you don't get too much water. You can see that this is kind of mixing together a little bit. That will happen to yours. Okay, so the last one that you are going to do is the salt technique. This one's super easy, super simple. What you are going to do is you can do this one with any of the watercolor techniques. I am going to show you a couple here that you can do. I'm just going to start by using kind of that, I'm going to use black to start so you can kind of see just what the solid color looks like. Let me move this down. So with the black, you have to make sure that you cannot wait to do this one. Once you paint it down, your swatch of color down, you need to do this right away, otherwise it's not going to work. You take some salt, just kind of pinch and sprinkle it on. So you can see that that's kind of made a texture, and what that's doing now is the salt is the water is getting dissolved by the salt, and it will leave a really cool texture. So just leave it, don't wipe it, don't paint back over top of it after you've done that. But once again, just like our rubbing alcohol and our saran wrap, it looks really cool when you mix colors together. So I'm going to take some blue and kind of do like a gradient to purple. A little bit of some red happening there. Okay, red, violet. Then I'm going to take my salt right away. Sprinkle on top, let it sit, and you'll see some really cool stuff happening like that. This one's really cool to combine actually rubbing alcohol with and things like that. This is another one using the gradient that's good to combine some rubbing alcohol with. So those are your techniques that you will have finished. I told you I'd show you the wet on wet. Again, as that's kind of blending together a little bit, looks pretty cool. So these will be hanging up on the board so you guys can kind of refer back to them. And these are the watercolor techniques that you guys will be using to create that drawing, or to paint that drawing that we created. And I will show you guys that in a little later, depending on your time, or maybe today, or you'll start class with it tomorrow.